Welcome to the Agent of Wealth podcast with Mark Bautis from Bautis Financial. In this podcast, Mark helps guide you towards financial freedom, ensure you never run out of money, and create a balance in life that prioritizes what is most important to you. Join us for this journey as Mark draws from years of expertise and guest experts to solve the multiple wealth building challenges involved in your financial life.
Welcome back to the Agent of Wealth podcast. This is your co-host, John Williams. Today, I'm joined by Gregory Kovsky, President and CEO of International Business Associates, the Pacific Northwest's oldest and largest business brokerage firm, founded in 1975. With over 30 years of experience in mergers and acquisitions, Gregory has personally facilitated more than 300 transactions for privately held and family-owned businesses, amongst many other things. I could talk for a while. I was on his LinkedIn page. There's a lot going on there, and I'm really excited about the conversation today. But beyond his transactional expertise, Gregory is also a published author, seminar speaker, and advocate for entrepreneurship, operating on a unique work-life balance philosophy that we'll definitely be touching on later in the conversation. So, Gregory, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here.
So I'm really excited about this conversation. We have a lot of clients who are small business owners. There's all this aura in the marketplace about being a business owner, and I don't think it's always as sexy as it looks in a lot of ways. But the dream is in a lot of cases to build that business, grow it, sell it someday. So I'm really interested in diving into the conversation. But to get started, I'd love the audience to learn a little bit about you, your journey. What led you to the world of M&A and mergers and acquisitions, and eventually to purchasing IBA in 2000?
Certainly, I'll give you a thumbnail sketch. So I grew up in the Pacific Northwest. I'm a Portland boy, tired of the rain, ready to spread my wings and fly. I went to the University of Texas down in Austin, studied business, degree in investment finance and accounting, elected on my father's encouragement to pursue my childhood passion, and I spent 4 years as a college basketball coach, national recruiter, and after 4 years decided I was ready to return to the Pacific Northwest and wanted to explore the next chapter. IBA had sold my father's veterinary hospital and real estate. He had been impressed with them. He introduced me to the founder of IBA, Bill Kovsky. It intrigued me, so I joined the firm in 1994, emerged as one of the top salesmen with the firm between 94 and 2000. Was selected to be the successor, reached agreement with Bill for the purchase of the company. We had an old guard of brokers, many approaching retirement, some with kids in college, etc. We're somewhat similar to a real estate firm, and he didn't want to disrupt their worlds. And many had mentored me, liked me. Bill knew I wouldn't micromanage them, so I took over the helm of the company in 2000 and did wonderful up until 2008, 2009. We had the Great Recession, and when people stopped buying products and services, when the banks shut down, they stopped buying businesses. So we went from 15 brokers in the field at that time down to 6, including myself. Many retired, some went on to other professions. I only have one left with the firm from pre-Great Recession. But since that time, we have steadily grown. At this point, 18 brokers out in the field beyond myself, facilitating transactions, 10 offices in the Pacific Northwest. We're also commercial realtors, so we have the ability to sell both assets for a client, the business and the real estate. Think in terms of a winery. They may have vineyards that go with the production facility, and we can represent them in the whole package from valuation to closing.
Excellent. Is your clientele niche right now? I mean, you mentioned real estate. Has it evolved? Are there areas of the types of businesses you like to work with? Tell us a little bit about that.
Certainly, we represent businesses in 20 different industry sectors, from manufacturing to technology to education, quite a spectrum. They're all on our website. We're pretty industry agnostic as long as it's a good solid business. And we go from EBITDA of about a quarter million up to 5 million in terms of profitability, and then we'll apply a 2 to 7 multiple to that, depending on the risk in industry and other dynamics in valuation.
Excellent. Yeah, that is a wide array. I'd like to take a step back and just actually take a look at this from the business perspective. And I mean, we even have a lot of business owners who sometimes say, I don't know if I could ever sell this business, if it's sellable. And then if they ever do get to that point, I'm curious what it looks like from your angle and what you've seen is in the beginning for that business. Like, so let's say I'm a business owner and I'm like, all right, I'm looking at retiring. I want to sell this business. They come to you. Like, what does that look like typically?
Well, my mother was a school teacher, and I believe a good relationship starts with communication and education. So we're going to sit down with someone, understand why do you want to sell? What have you built? Describe your company. And the first step is to do a valuation of the business. The valuation at IBA serves two purposes. On the seller side, you get to sample our knowledge, experience, customer service, and learn what is the estimated value of the business, because valuation of companies is a sophisticated, nuanced, subjective science. On one side, we look at return on investment and historical financials. On the other side, we look at it like art, that it's one of a kind. We were talking before we came on the air about you being based in Philadelphia or growing up there, and you want a Philly cheesesteak, there is a spectrum of quality and demand for different products. So when you value a business, that reputation, the staff, the location, that is where we begin to twist the dial to come up with the valuation, because not all, and you can comment, not all Philly cheesesteak sandwiches are equal, are they, John?
Well, first of all, Philadelphia is not just cheesesteaks. I mean, I appreciate you using that as the example. But you're absolutely right. And one of the funniest things about growing up, or just even still now, is everyone has their opinion as to which one's the best, and they're always different. There are obviously some common ones, but there absolutely is. Between the bread, the cheese, everything. They're definitely not all created equal.
Well, but now think of it from valuation. If you had a child who wanted to own that business model, which one would you feel best, from systems and processes to location to reputation, with them buying? Because it all comes down to mitigating risk. That's where valuation starts. And on our side, we're evaluating, do we believe in this business model? Do we trust the owner? Can we work with them collaboratively? And then are they realistic on value? We've done over 4,400 transactions in our history, and we have market knowledge that we can share. We just put into escrow a education business that I believe had 17 offers at the end of the day. I just put in escrow a company that manufactures countertops, porcelain, granite, quartz, etc., for the construction industry. We had 6 offers. So each of those offers has an opinion on value. we establish a go-to-market price, which we need to justify, but then the buyer has their say, and our job is to get people to shake hands because the definition of a fair deal is what a willing buyer and willing seller agree. And because there's no exact duplicate for any business, market conditions ultimately will control where a valuation ends up.
Well, speaking of the market conditions, how involved are you on the buyer side and tracking down the buyers? Is there a network you tap into to try and find a good fit? Are you out hitting the pavement trying to find the buyers as well?
It is. As part of our representation, we will create a robust marketplace of buyers. I will tell you, finding buyers is much easier than bringing product to market because our clients traditionally are executing their vision, doing what they enjoy, and making money. So, what's the urgency to sell? On the buyer side, we have sold companies to publicly traded companies, privately held companies, private equity, family offices, solopreneurs. There's high demand. I mean, actually, in our culture right now, there's a founder creator ethos that exists that people want to not work for the man but have their own company. And so I have a 22-year-old kid who comes from an entrepreneurial family. It's in his DNA. He has a great job right now working in the tech industry, but in the back of his mind, he does want to be a entrepreneur. It's I caution anyone who wants to be an entrepreneur, don't go into it undercapitalized. That is the most common reason you fail. You may have ideas, but as Elon Musk says, creating the prototype is the easy part. Doing it at scale is where it gets problematic.
Yeah, well, he knows that reading his biography, and you don't realize some of the trials and tribulations that guy went through, and that makes a lot of sense. The owner himself, like you mentioned, a lot of times they're in the business and they're a big part of the business and trying to generate, just continue doing their thing, growing the business, being an important part of the business. What are some of the struggles you see in this evaluation process, as this owner comes to you? What are some of the hangups and some of the areas where sometimes things get more complicated as from the owner and your relationship with the owner?
Well, first of all, they're not comfortable sharing information. Many times, even their own family doesn't know how much money they're making and what they're doing. They just know they're successful and maybe they're generous beyond that. So, opening up and sharing information, because just like buying a publicly traded stock, a buyer is going to want to go through historical financials. They're going to maybe do a quality of earnings assessment. They're going to look at leases and equipment, customer concentration. And so getting comfortable with sharing information and understanding the value of that, where right now we're selling a company that does business with the US Navy. So how do you facilitate the assignment of that contract? And then how do you overcome fear related to customer concentration? Because if you don't continue that contract, there's not a lot of willing and able replacements for the U.S. Navy as a customer.
That's really interesting because the owner has been a lot of times been in the business for so long, like it could be plus 30 years in a lot of cases, and the emotion that's involved with that, just even taking that first step and trying to get to the point where they're even ready to sell and but and they can even have an idea. They put so much time and effort into this business, an idea of how much the business should be worth based off of it being their baby, you know? So I can only imagine what you've come across in that like emotion part of the transaction.
It's very emotional. It's often selling a child. And beyond that, everyone thinks about price, but that's extended family. If you've owned a company for 30 years, you know all your employees intimately. You probably know their kids. You don't want to go to a restaurant in town in retirement and face John or Jane, who you know well, who has to tell you they've been laid off and now they don't have money for preschool or whatever it may be. And then also their customers. It's very sad when customer service, product quality diminish because their names are tied to that. And the same with vendors. They may have developed relationships with vendors where they were dependent on, let's say it was a roofing company and they bought plywood from a certain supplier and now they migrate. Well, that revenue stream disappears with a supplier who they were close with for an extended period. They golfed together or whatever, and you no longer have control. So you are correct. It's a very nuanced emotional element to selling a business. And layer on that, say your spouse retires and they want to end up in Florida, they don't want to be in the cold anymore, and you still own the business and you're not ready to sell and retire, that can cause stress in the household. And it also can, for partnerships where objectives change between partners who maybe worked well together, but maybe they're different age groups, or one wants to double down and invest and grow the company, and the other wants to take chips off the table. So we wear many hats in the process, one of them being a psychiatrist to walk through people through this because we need to walk through these discussions before we're in negotiations because it's a waste of everyone's time if we get to the threshold and rather than getting in the church and getting married, one is hopping on a Harley and riding away.
Yeah, yeah. I hadn't really thought about that part of it, but obviously that makes a lot of sense. The relationship and just making sure that everyone that's involved is happy. But it also makes me think of, and you use the analogy of you're almost giving away a child. It also sheds light on how important the new buyer is to that seller, not just from the money they're giving them, but who they are as a person and how that seller might feel about how that buyer may see out their legacy.
Most certainly. I mean, we do business with people we know, like, and trust, and we work to build that rapport. We're looking at the buyer's relevant experience. They're not just focused on a P&L and profitability. Do they have the ability to run this company? Are they a right match for the culture? I have brokers on my team who are native speakers in Russian and Chinese, and we serve those entrepreneurial communities. Well, if employees and staff communicate bilingually, you need to be aware of that dynamic in the company. And it's been, as long as America's been around, the greatest ladder of opportunity is to come to America, start a business, grow it, and generate wealth. I mean, it doesn't matter which century you look at, there have been entrepreneurs. Ben Franklin was a big entrepreneur and created many things. We have seen that throughout history and it continues to happen today.
Do you see any consistency or any sort of patterns among those who struggle with this transition, selling the business versus others, or is there anything that jumps out at you there?
It's often people's identity. I had a client in the past who said he found a statistic that people die 7 years on average after they retire. And his joke was, well, if I never sell, I'll never die. But it is true, it's people's identity. Maybe someone loves to play golf, but they like going golfing on the weekend, talking about their week in business previously. If it's just golfing without the conversation and complaining about a customer, an employee, or how they problem solve something successfully, sharing it with friends, it's diminished. So I always say business is the ultimate competitive sport. It's hard to replace the game of business because every day you got to lace up your sneakers and get out on the court and compete against others selling similar products and services. And if you snooze, you lose. I mean, one of my favorite stories is Sears, in that Sears was Amazon before Amazon. They send everyone in the United States a catalog, which you could buy everything you ever needed. Imagine if Sears had, in the 1990s, put their whole catalog online and evolved into the technology age. Would we even have Amazon today? Because Sears was there first, and they had the brick and mortar, they had the distribution, they had the biggest building in the United States in Chicago. They were in a wonderful place, but they didn't identify consumer habits are changing and we need to adjust.
Yeah, there's so many examples of that, and just in business in general. I don't know why Blockbuster just popped into my mind. And Sears, man, I just remember right around Christmas going into the Sears catalog and circling everything. That was my Christmas list. I think I would like to take a step back and just and start to look at, obviously in our business we have some small business owners, and there's some aspects of, some of the conversations I've had. One of the biggest ones is the key person and how they're such a big part of the business, like the owner. They're such a big part of the value of that business. Are there just any general thoughts on that? I mean, obviously, if you have somebody who's like they're doing a lot of the selling and they're a big part of the business, is have you been able to facilitate those sales in any way and get over that hump?
Most certainly. We need to acknowledge that people matter. I mean, if you're the Kansas City Chiefs, they're not the Kansas City Chiefs without Patrick Mahomes. I think anyone would recognize the value of that team, the value of that organization would be diminished if he was not secured long term as an employee. So then you get into staging that element. So the first thing I always tell my clients is we need to identify who are the key employees. We will need to engage with them likely in the sale involving the buyer, but let's do it late. Let's make sure the books and records get a thumbs up during due diligence. Let's make sure we are able to reach agreement on the legal documents. Let's make sure financing or investors are secured for the transaction before we pull back the curtain. And then it's controlling the narrative and approaching that employee or employees. Maybe it's golden handcuffs where you say, I valued you. You were very instrumental in getting this company where it is. I need your help on the transition. I am going to leave X amount in escrow for you as consideration for your contribution, but I need your help transitioning ownership. And be honest, communicate clearly, and then at the right stage, usually close to sale, maybe 2 weeks or less from the transaction being completed, introduce the buyer. The buyer's going to want to make a good impression on the party. They're not going to want turnover, so they're going to be cautious in their engagement, but offering everyone continued employment, um, conveying that there's usually a transition period for retiring ownership or transitioning out ownership. So the previous owner can say, I'm joining you as an employee. I'm going to be here for a while post sale. Nothing's going to change. Just give this gentleman a choice where I mention multiple offers. They can convey, I had choices. This is the one I selected. I knew we needed the right person for the helm. And there are situations, we're working on a manufacturing company right now where ownership is taking it as far as they can in terms of skill. They don't have the MBA degree, they don't have the resources to ramp up manufacturing for national distribution. They're regionally distributed. So they're on the market saying, let's acknowledge it needs someone else to take this child to college and beyond. I've got them well prepared. They made varsity on basketball or football in high school, but I got my kid there. We shot hoops together in the driveway. I threw passes to them in the playground, but I'm not the coach to get him a college scholarship.
Yeah, that's great insight. And I can see how you couple that with, the idea that this business owner is married to the business. And I can totally understand why it's important to have someone like you to facilitate that. With that said, and all the transactions you've been through, what are some of the common mistakes you see business owners making who intend to sell or making leading up to the sale, or even just dating back as far as 5, 10 years back before they actually sell the business?
Great question. So, first, being the hub of everything at the company, an owner should work on the business. More value exists for a business that they executively manage versus being the head chef at a Michelin star restaurant and hand touching every meal. That's a real hard business to sell. So, thinking ahead, creating redundancy, developing people that you can go on vacation. A great question on the buyer side is, when was your last vacation? How long were you gone for? If they say, we went and wine tasted in France for 3 weeks, it was wonderful, and the business didn't miss a beat, that's much better than I'm selling because I haven't had a vacation in 15 years. So that's a really important piece. Customer concentration is a big thing. um, don't have all your eggs in one basket because that creates fear and diminishes value. And then having established systems and processes, the answer, that's the way we've always done it, is not great if you're not there to train and mentor someone. But being able to hand out a sales manual that someone can read and has scripts and has approaches for engaging with customers, even sample emails or frequently asked questions. You see that commonly on websites. We have one on ours for both buyers and sellers. So you begin to standardize processes and information.
Yeah, so like operating procedures and things that can kind of someone could look to that maybe they've never done something before, like it's kind of written down somewhere. As we come to the end here, Is there anything that you'd like to say to that young entrepreneur, whether they're a seller or just like some of the things you've those high level wisdom pieces you've picked up along the way? Some of those entrepreneurs are in the business. You have any to offer that entrepreneur?
First of all, know you're going to have failure. So, entrepreneurship is the big time game. So, you can read books of any entrepreneur, and they've had successes and failures. So, you need to go in and say, I'm I'm comfortable with failure. I know there will be turbulence. If you psychologically are not like able to handle that, my wife wouldn't be able to handle that, then you shouldn't do this. Make sure you have relevant knowledge and experience that you can tap into, or mentors and support systems. If you're a rainmaker as a salesperson, focus on that piece at the company and hire a great CFO if you're not the numbers guy, and then have the capital to weather storms and to grow, because it's very frustrating as an entrepreneur to see a window of opportunity but not have the chips to put on the table to play the hand, and then seeing someone else move into that space. But manage your growth. I mean, don't bite off more than you can chew. It can also be a failure point if you grow too rapidly. Make sure you're growing intelligently.
Makes sense. In closing, I'd like to throw out there, you had mentioned earlier, it's harder to find the sellers than it is to find the buyers. In that experience, is there something you'd like to say to that business owner who might be sitting there thinking, I don't think my business is worth anything? Or is there value in just to see what happened? Like coming to you, is it going to cost a lot of money? Is there any reason why they shouldn't reach out to someone like you or somebody else to just say, you never know how someone's going to be able to help them through that next step?
I always recommend seeking knowledge and talking to brokers. Not all brokers are the same. Our business model is 100% paid on performance. So whether a business sells for 6, 7, or 8 figures, people don't pay us unless we perform and complete a transaction. Not every firm is that risk acceptant. Many charge retainers, administrative fees, etc. But I'll give you an example of a business I sold, which at face value, the owner and many people would think is not valuable. It was a floor covering store. All they had was carpet samples and hardwood samples and tile samples, etc. No assets. They ordered carpet for specific projects, but they had been around for decades. They were trusted for installation. They were trusted to be fair on pricing. They had a great brand in the marketplace, a well known name. Um, if you look at a business like that, it's all blue sky and goodwill. There isn't much in the way of assets. There was a few vans and some equipment and office materials, but it was very profitable for the owner. The niche was not going away, and we sold it for a strong market value, and the buyer has thrived.
That's great to hear, and I'm sure there's some listeners who are on the edge there who might appreciate hearing that as well. Well, that's all I have for you today. I'm sure we could go on all day with this conversation. This has been amazing. Congratulations to you on a successful business and a illustrious career. And thank you for joining me today for the Agent of Wealth podcast. Before we go, of course, I'd like to share with our listeners where they might be able to learn more about you and get in touch with you.
Certainly. So I would direct people first to our website, which is ibainc.com. So ice cream boy, apple, ice cream Nancy, Charlie.com. Specifically on that, I would say look at our blog. It was developed as a library resource for the entrepreneurial community and has had almost 200 authors in its history. And so many questions related to buying and selling a business are covered. I just wrote an article on how do we deal with gift cards and gift certificates in a transaction. It may seem like a tiny detail, but it's a big issue because the seller received money for those and the buyer would assume the liability for delivery of those items. So legally, we got to address that. If you wanted to talk to me, you can call me at our corporate headquarters at 425-454-3052.
Excellent. Well, of course, we'll share all of your information, all that information in the resources section of the show notes. But Gregory, I can't thank you enough for being here today, and thank you everyone for everyone who tuned in to today's episode.
Don't forget to follow the Agent of Wealth on the platform you listen from and leave us a review of the show. We're currently accepting new clients, and if you'd like to schedule a one-on-one consultation with our advisors, please do so at bautisfinancial.com/call.
Thank you for listening to the Agent of Wealth podcast. Click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered represents the views and opinions of the guests and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Bautis Financial. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only and is not intended to be a substitute for professional financial planning and investment advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investments and financial planning.